All right, our time now is 6:42 Central African time, and we go now to Madagascar, where hundreds of protesters across Madagascar are calling for the resignation of President Andry Rajoelina. What initially began as youth-led demonstrations in the capital Antananarivo over water shortages and power blackouts had spread nationwide. The United Nations say at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured so far in the week-long protests. However, government has rejected the figures. Joining us now is Jean-Luc Mutusami, journalist and director of media expertise, to discuss. Jean-Luc, good morning to you and thanks for making time.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Thanks very much.
Dissatisfaction with shortages in water, in electricity and energy supply. These have rapidly escalated into one of the most serious protests in the country. Take us through to how we got here and how this escalated.
The situation is extremely complex, as you just mentioned, and it has been something building up during the last years. A new president who was re-elected, Andry Rajoelina, who was re-elected in 2023 with lots of promises. But unfortunately, and I was in Madagascar a few weeks ago, unfortunately, the situation has not changed, and it has become worse with these load shedding for electricity, water supply, which is not constant in the cities, in the country, and the youth. You know, this youth, this so-called Gen Z, who is quite silent, these young men and women who are just going to work, going to the university, they're just watching the elders, the people who've been accepting this situation for years, for decades, and now they said, "Stop! We don't want this anymore." And they came out in crowds, in huge crowds, in all over the country, and it started in Antananarivo, in the capital city. So the movement yesterday was brought to some kind of halt, just a kind of strategic pause, as they mentioned yesterday, and it's coming again today with other people asked by the youth to join in.
The President, Rajoelina, dissolved the government in response to these protests. Before this, the energy minister was removed from that post 7 days into the protests. Were these moves too little, too late, and why could they not quell these protests?
Well, it's, as you say, too little, too late, and what the youth is asking is a total reset all over the place. That is the president and all those who hold offices, who are in power for the last years, who've actually been passing the ball of power to people in this little circle. So it's too little, too late. The president is still in place. The government a new government has still not been formed. The president asked people to send their resumes to show if they could join a new government. Yesterday, opposition and governmental people who are elected at the National Assembly, they were sitting together to try to find out a solution out of this crisis. They've not been able to find a kind of consensus. So what we're waiting now is to see how, on one side, this movement is going to behave, is going to change, because there is now a new committee that was just announced this morning, a committee that is going to try to organize the movement, because the youth, they're just going out, they're just trying to show themselves and show what they want and demonstrate and say what they want. But there is a lack of organization. It seems that things are coming up little by little. It's going to be with some municipal councillors who are leading the movement. There's no leader as such, but a group of people, and they are calling for all forces of the country, be it the citizens, the church, trade unions, to join the movement today.
With these demonstrations in the capital Antananarivo, security forces have reportedly responded violently with tear gas dispersed. Of course, as we mentioned, people have been killed and there's also scores injured, according to a hospital source. Why do you think the country would ban protests as they did initially? And how can they justify this kind of response from security forces?
Yeah, the security forces, they respond like this, but the reality also in the field is that on one side you have security forces who are really using what you just described, and at the same time there are other police officers who are joining the march and who are walking with the protesters. There are people there's a real divide in the way security forces are behaving during these protests. And one of the calls that were made by this new committee, this new organization committee, I don't know which name they're going to give to it in a few hours maybe, is also to ask the military to join in. And if the military steps in favor of protesters, that could be a major shift.
On the 27th of September's gathering in the capital, schools ended up being shut down and curfews were implemented. How are businesses then in the capital affected by these protests, and what are they calling for, the business fraternity?
This is one of the main issues that people are facing. Shops are closed. People can't buy food. People can't buy anything. I have one colleague who was in Madagascar who just came to Mauritius for a conference and who is going back. And this is interesting. I'll just make one short note on this. It's that foreigners are not targeted by these protests. Flights are still on. International flights are still on. So some people are coming to Mauritius to buy soap, to buy little things to bring with them in their suitcases because shops are closed. And as you just said, this is one of the major collateral damages. It's that businesses are shut, no one goes to work, and it's a curfew and streets are empty just because anything could happen. There are looters who've been guided inside the groups to make some problems and to change the focus from a demonstration to looting. This is what some of the demonstrators say. And businesses are closed, and we don't know. I don't know how long people in Madagascar will be able to accept this situation, because it could bring something else, that is other people who are not involved in these demonstrations who may come and join in.
You mentioned the Gen Zs also being at the forefront of these protests. President Rajoelina came into power in 2009 after a coup, and then back in 2023, when he was re-elected, he promised reform. And one of the things he said was that he'll engage in direct dialogue with this group of Gen Zs, the young people of Madagascar particularly. Has this happened, and what difference has it made, if it has?
Oh, not really, not really. He is 51, and he himself, when he arrived in power in 2009, he was 35 or 34. And yes, these are all promises. And there's one element also which is very interesting there, is that they have lots of so-called influencers who are young and who are among the youth, supposedly among the youth, but these people are totally disconnected with what's really happening on the ground. They are just there to pass messages, and this connection with the youth, with the grassroots, with the people, the peasants, with the youth, and those who are outside who have to earn their living every day, has not taken place. And this is why they want their voices to be heard, and this is the way they chose to do it.
What kind of role and influence does the church yield when it comes to particularly these protests, but generally in the political landscape of Madagascar? We know that members of the Council of Christian Churches in Madagascar, or the FFKM, and the Malagasy Bible Society have expressed solidarity with the families of the deceased from the protests, as well as those injured and those whose properties were destroyed. In what other ways can they help the country towards peace and finding lasting solutions?
I think they can try to initiate some kind of dialogue. Yesterday, a group of the FFKM went to the presidency and met the president to talk, to see how they can become some kind of in-between between the presidency and the demonstrators. They mentioned that they are preoccupied, and this is what the president said in a press communique. He said that he received encouragements from this group of religious leaders, of Christian leaders, and also that they prayed together. What's important with this group is that they are credible, and to be able to initiate some kind of dialogue, the youth and the presidency have to find some kind of common ground and find credible actors to be mediators, and the church is one of them. And then there is another group, which is the military, but they have, I would say, other methods to be heard in this kind of situation. So mediators are few. The international community has tried to voice out its concern through some communiques, regional organizations. The SADC, for example, Madagascar is holding the presidency of the SADC this year after the summit that took place in August last. Other organizations like the Indian Ocean Commission and also all the local organizations, regional organizations, and the United Nations have voiced out their concerns. But for the time being, this is what can be done. That is press communiques, trying to find ways of mediation, but mediation needs one person and another from this group of demonstrators, and for the time being, there is no leader.
Jean-Luc, thank you so much again for your time, and I hope you do find some way of having a good weekend. Let's see where these protests go, but we're hoping that there is going to be a solution.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.
Bye. Jean-Luc Mutusami is a journalist, director of media expertise, talking to us, giving us the latest in terms of Madagascar's protests there. Young people taking to the streets protesting against water shortages as well as electricity cuts.
Je, una